on stage am Tilly Metz. Willkommen. Guten Morgen. Wir schwätzen über die globale Distribution vom Covid-Vaccin. Für was ist das Sujet?
Ich denke, das ist noch einmal ein ganz wichtiges Sujet, wo man muss gucken, was war auch der Europäischen Union sein Rolle, wie ist das gelaufen, die letzten 2 Jahre mit der globalen Verteilung auch von der Vaccin, von der Entwicklung von der Vaccin, auch wie gerecht das verläuft, wo sind wir überhaupt drin, nicht nur an der EU zu vaccinieren, aber auch außerhalb. Schießen der Beschluss kann zu sagen, also weltweit ist im Moment so, dass über 65% ob man eine erste Dosis tun, wenn man aber gucken die Länder mit niedrigem Einkommen, da sind wir über 16%. Das heißt, du hast noch einen immensen Gap von Accessibilität von der Vaccin an den Ländern, wo niedrig Einkommen ist. Und was ein schreiend ungerecht geht natürlich ist.
Und was der ungerecht geht, hast du Redebedarf und mir dazu haben wir ein Skript präpariert. Da waren Tilly Metz nicht involviert, nein, die Spielregeln von EU on Stage. Die Europadeputierten und den Lützeburger Kommissar nennen als Sujet. Wir definieren das Skript. Und als erstes Invité bitten wir direkt auf die Bühne den Emrich Badjo von Médecins Sans Frontières. Emrich, welcome. Your mic is here. You can take a seat here.
Thanks.
And we take a seat together now. Yes, Tilly already said it in her introduction. This unequal distribution of the COVID vaccine. I have a statistic here where we have, like, I mean, Portugal, they are the best ahead. These are figures from June this year. 96% of the population got at least 1 dose. In Nigeria, only 15%, only 9.5% of the population is fully vaccinated. You work for Médecins Sans Frontières, I said it. What do you do there?
So Médecins Sans Frontières is a humanitarian medical organization. And the word humanitarian means that we work in very complex settings where access to healthcare, but also to vaccines and medical treatments is very difficult. So we try to deliver healthcare in the most difficult places around the world.
And why is Nigeria and the global south lagging behind?
Well, there's multiple factors, but let's start with the most important one, and that's the inequity or the unequal distribution of vaccines. And large part of that has to do with access. That means even before there was a vaccine, we already had conversations on how can we be ethical and fair when it comes to distribution of vaccines. So we said, okay, let's first vaccinate the high-risk groups and then the lower, and we do that globally, and then we go to the next category.
If you're talking about the global vaccine distribution, there are facts and figures that I have here. And if you look at it, it looks wonderful. Luxembourg donated 10 million. Germany, over a billion, 1.9 billion. The UK, 3.1. The United States, 4.8. And so on and so forth. You also have the Melinda Gates Foundation with 1.1 billion. It's wonderful, isn't it?
Well, the solidarity is wonderful, but we also need to be honest on when we donate it. And we donated when the majority of our people were vaccinated, and what we donated were our leftovers in large majority. Vaccines that were about to expire, vaccines that we didn't need anymore because people either didn't want to get vaccinated anymore in our countries, or they were already vaccinated or had an infection. Which means that in some cases, in some African countries, vaccines arrived as a donation, and they only had 2 weeks to put them in their arms. That's impossible. And so we donated in large part way too late, and we donated our leftovers.
Speaking about leftovers, or not even leftovers, about more than 10,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccines were destroyed in Luxembourg. And I want to ask a question to our public now. Ich meine mal auf Lützeburgisch. Also, Emrich sagt, angefangen zu spenden, Vaccin zu spenden, dem Moment, wo wir heute genug hatten. Will ich fragen, wie gegen dir dann Vaccin verdelen? Also gegen dir Vaccin verdelen besieht Verein auch die Jungen, die offensichtlich am Kader von der Covid-Krise Männer vulnerabel sind, hier dritte Dosis hatten, oder gegen die irgendwann an den Punkt kommen, wo wir vielleicht ein Teil von der Population Männer geschützt tun, und schon anfangen, auch in den globalen Süden zu verteilen. Wen ging recht verteilen, wenn nicht für ihn sein dritte Vaccin hat? Zwei zu Lützeburg. Kein? Lebensspannend. Okay, gut, kein. Ja, eine Person, merci. Dann, so heißt mal für was?
Ich denke mal, dass man für dich als Population gegen die Mutter vaccinieren und dann nur gegen die Mutter aufhängen, die Länder zu gehen.
Dein Nummer ist?
Bombardella Laura.
Also Laura, du siehst, also du sagst das System wie am Flieger, wo wenn sie dort Security-Anweisungen machen, wo sie sagt, okay, als ich schütze sie, setzt sie als erste Maske auf und dann hilft der anderen. Das ist sozusagen dein Motto.
Ja, ich meine, also viele Länder, wo nur dem System halt funktionieren.
Mhm, okay. Und all die anderen gesehen das auch nicht? Wie gesagt, ich gesehen, du hast Hand. Ja.
Vaccin verschenken an Nigeria, da soll kein Vaccin mehr. Das Problem fängt ja wie frei und so viel Narkose, die rufen. Also kein.
Okay, wunderbar, merci. Dein Nummer ist? Owen. Owen is asking, how can it be that Luxembourg, with a population of 600,000 citizens, will manages to vaccinate the whole population in Nigeria has a hard time getting any vaccine?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, Nigeria is a country with 90 million people. That is, approximately, what is it, like 25% of Europe, or 20% of what Europe has. So it's a big country. It's a complex country. So parts of the country have a lot of conflict. It's a very large country. It's almost half as big as the European continent as well. And it's a country, of course, that has much less access to healthcare in terms of health facilities. And of course, they didn't get vaccines that quickly. So there's a multitude of problems that kind of lead to that they don't cover that. And it's not just only for COVID vaccines, that is for anything related to healthcare in general, even other vaccines or other medicines, life-saving medicines, where that's an issue in many countries.
So what can be the answer from the political legislator?
We need to look at the intellectual properties of vaccines. So first we need to realize that many of the technologies that allowed us to have vaccines were not only produced by the pharmaceutical companies, but they were actually paid by taxpayer money, and they were developed, these technologies, at their own universities, at their own research institutes. And because of that, we also need to make sure that this technology is available to other countries so we can go towards local production and countries become less dependent on our charity. And we've seen there is no charity.
Is there a best practice model that you have in mind? Like one country that did their homework in the sense you...
Yeah, I think there are good examples. India at one point said in the 70s, we don't want to pay so much money for vaccines because we're a very poor country. We don't have people that have, for example, access to a vaccine for hepatitis B, which was killing a lot of people, also children. And they had to pay, you need 3 vaccines, and they were $12 a piece. So they said, hey, we're going to produce them ourselves. We don't care. But India could do that because they are a large country, a geopolitical power. For other countries, that is difficult, but that model has worked. Why? India is now the largest vaccine producer in the whole world. They produce about 70% of all vaccines worldwide against a much lower price that many other companies do, which makes them accessible to the countries that are often most in need of those vaccines.
Amrish, thank you very much for taking the time today.
Thank you.
Tilly, mir stehen rum. Op.
Thank you.
Ich habe ganz viele Necke gesehen am Kap. Du weißt ganz einfach, mit dem, was den Amrish gesagt hat.
Ja, op jeden Fall. Also Médecins Sans Frontières machen eine immens wertvoll Arbeit und sie machen oft den Fanger an die Wunden, weil sie weisen wirklich, ob dann Gerechtigkeiten von der Accessibilität von der Vaccin, und das hat nämlich ganz gut gesagt, da gibt es intellektuelle Proprietätsrechte ob der Vaccin, das ist wie das Rezept vom Vaccin, nicht nur das Rezept, aber auch wie ein Vaccin produziert wird. Und nämlich hat am Ende ganz gut gesagt, wenn wir öffentlich Gelder an die Entwicklung von Vaccin stürchen, was wir heute gemacht haben, dann müssen die intellektuellen Proprietätsrechte zumals an Zeiten von einer Pandemie abgehoben gehen. Für das eben Länder wie Indien, die total Fähigkeiten haben, die Entreprisen haben, auch könnten viel mehr frei hätte könnte selber Vaccin produzieren. Und da tut die bloß, ich weiß nicht, ob das Matko tut mir gestern, als es am Funk zu einem Akkord kommt, was Tiere deelweis Tierwe von den intellektuellen Proprietätsrechten ugeht, da also 20 Monate verhandelt gehen, mit was da rauskommt, als aber enttäuschend. Für was ist es enttäuschend? Weil es limitiert sich wirklich just auf die Vaccin. Wir brauchen aber für die Pandemie zu bekämpfen nicht nur Vaccin, wir brauchen noch Medikamente, wir brauchen auch Testprozeduren, alles das. Und das limitiert, wie gesagt, auf 5 Jahre. Und wie gesagt, da lebt just am Fond den einzelnen Ländern Patente abzuheben, für das sie dann an do können produzieren. Das heißt, limitiert sich auch sogar auf 12 von den Ländern, die lo Access haben, wenn ich so der vereinfacht so, auf die Rezepte von den Vaccin. Und auch das ist eine Ungerechtigkeit, dass nicht für alle Länder, wo die intellektuellen Proprietätsrechte abgehoben sind, und dann natürlich den Timing. 20 Monate danach könnte zu einem nicht zufriedenstellenden Abheben, Teilweise von den intellektuellen Proprietätsrechten.
Also wir haben probiert, Vertreter von der pharmazeutischen Industrie zu invitieren. Viele E-Mails wurden geschickt, ganz viele Telefonen. Sie wollten nicht. Das ist schwer, die Spuren hier Position zu verteidigen. Sie hatten die Möglichkeit gehabt. Vaccine Europe wurde gefragt. An noch andere. Vaccine Europe als Lobbyorganisation für eben die pharmazeutische Industrie. Sie wollten nicht. Schlussendlich erschloss du also umso mehr.
Sie sind nicht froh mit mir.
Die vielleicht auch nicht froh, Matthias, das ist die wart, auf die Bühne zu kommen. And we will switch to English. I will translate that because I think it's important for you to understand that. Tilly said, the pharmaceutical companies they are afraid of Tilly. And,
they don't like me at least.
And then I said, well, perhaps the next guest coming on stage, I don't know if he's afraid or totally happy with Tilly. We will see that now. John Ryan is from the European Commission, from the DG Santé. Welcome, John Ryan. Und wir werden Platz switchen. You can take your seat over here.
Hi, John.
Welcome. Yep, the mic, there you go. We're talking about the global vaccine distribution. How do you rate the job the EU has done or is doing?
It's a very complicated file, and I'd like to take a few minutes perhaps to explain, because I was listening carefully to what my colleague from Médecins Sans Frontières was saying. In the European Union in 2020, when the alert came in January from China, we immediately started to negotiate with companies to create and manufacture a vaccine which did not exist at that time. So we had to start from scratch. There were several universities, several pharmaceutical laboratories involved in creating the vaccine. And the result was, after 3 months, the 27 member states decided together to purchase this new vaccine. And in fact, there were 7 contracts signed, and a total of 1.6 billion euros, or billion doses of vaccine were produced and delivered to the European Union. 2/3 of the total production in Europe was exported. So we kept 1/3 for ourselves. So that's the facts of the situation. We exported 2/3 of our production here in Europe, but we also contributed financially. So a large number of doses were exported, but there was also very strong financial support. And in terms of local production, let me say that the European Union has invested 1 billion euros in investing in manufacturing capacity in Africa, which is completely new. So we've been engaging with the international community, with the World Health Organization, with the United Nations, in order to donate doses of vaccines, and in order to donate money, and in order to support the setting up of manufacturing capacity around the world. Now, the fact that only 15% of people in Nigeria have been vaccinated is a problem. It's not the worst example I can give you. There are worse examples than that. But I would say it's a problem of health systems around the world. The health systems around the world are not the same as in Luxembourg. In Luxembourg, you walk out of the school and you turn the corner and you find a doctor. You find a dentist, you find nurses, you find hospitals. It's not the same in other parts of the world. So this is a more general problem than simply a problem of vaccination.
And what about the problem of the Green Group attacking the European Commission injustice? Why?
First of all, I have also to come back more to the general context. The general context to make contracts with, at the end, 6 different companies was a good choice. Not only to deal with one company, but to deal with 6, because we did not know, the Commission did not know at the end of the day who is going to deliver first. So that was a good strategy. So all in all, let's be honest, the developing of vaccines inside the European Union and for the people of the European Union was a good strategy. We negotiated also at 27 around the table, so not single countries negotiating with pharmaceutical companies. So first of all, at the beginning, was quite a success story.
But now,
and then,
what's your case?
And my case is that we should ourselves, I say we, because I consider the Commission always like a cousin of the European Parliament kind. We are part of a same family.
It's an argument that you have within the family then, okay.
Yeah, so we have also conflicts in our big family. So you know that there are 3 big institutions. One is the Parliament, one is the Council, and one is the Commission. So now the Commission negotiated, and they are not used to negotiate. I understand that with pharmaceutical companies, with very, very big pharmaceutical companies. So they did different contracts with these pharmaceutical companies. And we say, if you put public money in the developing of a vaccine, then we need total transparency regarding where did the money go, what was the benefit for the companies, how much do they invested in research and development, in producing, etc. We need to know exactly what are the clauses of liability, for example. Who is responsible when there's a problem with secondary effects, etc. But all these important parts in the contract were redacted. You could not see them. So then we say as Greens, that's not okay. Sorry, we negotiated 27, we were around the table. We need to know, and the public, it is of public interest to exactly know what is in this contract, especially regarding also how is the production, what is expected, what are the conditions, what is the liability, what is the price also, that we know why is AstraZeneca cheaper than Pfizer-BioNTech, for example.
Okay, but now,
and then, as we didn't get a clear...
Last sentence on this one, please.
As we didn't get a clear answer, we could have an inside look into this contrast, but also redacted, and at the beginning we were not even allowed to speak about it. Then we said that's not okay, it's of public interest,
and
at the end of the day we went to the court.
You went to court?
In order to have this transparency. So it's sad.
Okay, no, now I give the floor to... Sorry, okay. I give the floor to John. What do you... you will have another occasion, I promise. What do you reply to?
Well, what Silly said is quite correct.
This is correct or incorrect?
Correct.
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 Okay.
Correct. This is the first time that the European Union has bought vaccines together for 27. And I'm actually quite proud. I'm the Director of Health in the European Commission, and it was in Luxembourg that we made the team in Luxembourg in the Cloche d'Or, where we actually negotiated and purchased the contracts. And we had to create a team from scratch. There was nobody there before. So it's quite true that we have no experience of buying vaccines. This was a new thing. But let me just say, to clarify, that we brought experts from the member states who are buying vaccines every day, and they were sitting beside us. The difference was that there were not 27 negotiations happening, but one negotiation happening. So the Commission was leading the negotiation, but we had the vaccine experts beside us. So I think it's true to say that it's the first time the European Union has made this joint purchase, but we were doing it with the member states in a very active way. The second point is, in terms of contracts, vaccine contracts, it's a normal part of vaccine contracts, with some exceptions, that the price and delivery and liability clauses are confidential. This is not, I'm not talking about the COVID vaccine, I'm talking about other vaccines. This is a normal clause in the contract. So to change that in an emergency situation for COVID vaccines would have been very difficult. The third point I would make is in relation to commercial competition. The European Union was purchasing these vaccines against other international partners. There are other parts of the world, Australia, Canada, United States, buying the vaccines from the same people at the same time. I think it would have been very dangerous to publish the contracts on our side if the United States and Australia and Canada did not publish their contracts at the same time. This would have given them a competitive advantage over us because they could have offered more money, for example, and they could have taken the vaccines. So I think there are a number of reasons at play here. We want to be transparent. We published the contracts. We crossed out the parts that were confidential. But my point is that in a negotiating situation where there's a shortage of supply, you have to be very careful about these transparency issues.
A final question to you before we'll conclude with Tilly. What can be the lesson or the lessons learned for the future? Because I think there will be other pandemics to come.
There is another pandemic.
Oh,
there's monkeypox. There's monkeypox here, variole du singe, which is here. Luckily, it's not on the same scale, and luckily, it's not as dangerous. But COVID is not gone away. There are new variants of COVID coming back in the autumn, and we're already negotiating for new vaccines for the autumn, booster shots, as we call them, for the autumn. But we have to strengthen health systems worldwide. That's my key message, because Luxembourg is well protected by its health system. You're very lucky here in Luxembourg to have doctors, nurses, you have a good Ministry of Health. It's all very well organized, but there are other parts of Europe. You don't have to go to Africa. There are other parts of Europe which don't have that system. If you look at the Balkans, for example. And people are traveling to and fro every day. There are goods traveling to and fro every day. So we need to strengthen health systems worldwide. And that's a huge challenge.
John Ryan, thanks a lot. Tilly Metz, wir stehen dran ab. Ich war hier drunter so frisch und schon eine Stunde ausschwarze gelos. Du hast nur 1 Minute Zeit für eine Konklusion.
Also was ganz wichtig ist, dass eben Transparenz an den Negoziationen, wen du dezidiert, was steht an den Kontrakten, weil es geht Vertrauen an die europäischen Institutionen von den Bürgerinnen, von den Bürgern, von euch alle Guten. Es geht aber auch Vertrauen, überhaupt sich vaccinieren zu lassen. Es sind ganz viele Leute, die hier mitgekriegt, die Kontrakte, die Vaccine sind nicht accessibel. Da fragen sie sich, was tun sie dann zu verstoppen? Die wisst, wie viel Méfiance überhaupt an noch verschiedene Länder nach aus par rapport zu sich vaccinieren lassen. Das ist eine Sache von Transparenz, auch weil öffentlich Gelder dran gegangen sind, dann nur die Recht zu wissen, was tun wir da bezahlt. Und auf der anderen Seite, dass da auch Vertrauen an Prozeduren, Vertrauen an die Vaccine. Und dafür wäre es wichtig, 100% Transparenz. Und los mal vielleicht noch kurz so, und wir müssen noch ehrlich sein mit euch selber. Mir Team Europe hat immer gesagt, dass die Europäische Kommission, das sind Memberstaaten an verschiedenen finanziellen Institutionen, haben auch ganz viel Vaccin exportiert, 1,8 Milliarden. Mehr, wie viel haben wir da donated, also geschenkt an lower income countries, also die, wo kein so ist, das sind da 408 Millionen so far. Das heißt, wir hatten als Ziel, oder wir haben als Ziel, bis mit, das wäre am Anfang 2022, 700 Millionen. Das heißt, wir sind da am Anfang aber weit vom Schuss. Das heißt, das System, den auch gut oder ein paar gedurcht war, von COVAX, von globaler Solidarität, den sich aber sonst auf eine gewisse Charität basiert, und nicht auf Obligationen wirklich weltweit zu delen, hat aber nicht funktioniert, weil wir gesehen dass Low-Income-Countries just über 16% vacciniert sind. Aus verschiedenen Ursachen, wie den Emmerich gerade gesagt hat.
Und an der Stelle muss man leider einen Punkt setzen. Tilly Metz, das war EU on Stage. Mit Tilly Metz, wo wir über die globale Distribution von Covid-Vaccin diskutiert haben. Vielmals merci, Tilly Metz, EU on Stage.
Merci vielmals.